This is a presentation of the report RT in Europe and Beyond that was recently published by the Center for Democratic Integrity. I'm the chair of the Center for Democratic Integrity. It's an NGO based in Austria. We founded it with my colleague Andrea Sumland. We founded it in at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in August 2020, and that's in a non-profit association which aims to monitor and analyze attempts of authoritarian regimes to influence politics and societies in Europe. And we focus our attention mostly on malign influence. We define malign influence in the European context as directly or indirectly subverting and undermining European values and democratic institutions. So in last year, almost a year ago, we decided to collect articles and chapters, do research on RT, on different versions of RT, and we collected a very nice collection of researchers and experts and journalists, and this is the result of our 1 year work. I will talk a little bit later also about the publication itself. I will also provide a very brief history of RT, Russia Today, how it became RT, how the concept changed. But first, we will listen to member of the European Parliament, Michael Gahler, who has been member of the European Parliament since 1999. Michael Gahler represents the German Christian Democratic Union, which is part of the European People's Party. If I'm not mistaken, Michael Gahler is also a foreign policy spokesman for the EPP and a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Subcommittee on Security and Defense. Michael Gahler, thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shekhovtsov. And I'm currently the standing rapporteur in the Parliament on Ukraine, so that is my most operational work ongoing. But as I see, when I see Dirk Schübel, we're also covering still Belarus. We are not forgetting them. So, and good to see you, and thanks for the invitation. And I'm very grateful for such work that is being done, such that it is nothing that it just kind of goes in here and out here, but there's something, so to say, physically that you can, that one can really read into and keep it up and show it in order to be in a position to have proof and evidence of what's ongoing. And when I think back, when did this whole discussion about disinformation and all that actually start? I think in my remembrance, it was when Crimea was attacked or occupied, when these green men stories came. And it was really with great shock, I think, that we had to acknowledge how unprepared even professional journalism was to counter or to uncover Russian lies. It was more than propaganda. It was lies, and is lies that we see. And I recall really weeks when people were discussing, well, who are these green men? Is it possible? What is ongoing there? And I think that was then the point where people started to think how to get our acts together to strengthen. Well, it is about resilience. First, perhaps to start with the professional people, that they wouldn't simply believe what they are told. I mean, this whole thing, I recall this occupation had just started, and I mean, I was of the opinion that it is Russians and so on. And I was in one discussion with some people in ZDF, and there was also a poll ongoing whether it's right what I'm saying or it's wrong. And then I think it was 80% people were against me. Yeah, and of course that was already something organized by those who called in, and then they asked me afterwards, "Why do you think you have lost?" Well, my answer was, well, I think, and it was, as I said, at the very beginning in 2014 when it all started on Crimea, I think I said, perhaps I'm pretty sure that some old Stasi links have been reactivated and they are now fighting their old battle. So that was my first own experience with being, so to say, exposed to an opinion that is not the normal one. Later, I talked also with journalists from public radios who got some messages from their superiors because there were organized texts or emails from listeners who were arguing about the anti-Russian attitudes of certain journalists based in Moscow and how is that possible. And so in the first phase, there was actually a reaction, oh, we have never had that. How is it that suddenly so many listeners are phoning in or mailing in and criticizing what we are doing? Are we doing something wrong? They have to double check their work and become a bit more careful or cautious. I think fortunately that phase is long over. We are aware of the troll factories. We are aware of the ways that Russia, and in particular those media that also are directed towards us, how they act. And I recall the very day of the shooting down of MH17, because on the German page of RIA Novosti, I think it was, they reported that these separatists, as they named them, had shot down a plane. So they reported it on the German page. And later it came out, when the others reported it as well, that it was this plane. And interesting enough, this message on the English page disappeared, but apparently they forgot the German page. So there was still this triumphant point from the separatists, we have shot down a plane, that stayed a bit longer. So sometimes these propagandists or these people, they are not, of course, not perfect. So the truth stays a bit longer than foreseen. So, but these were my first personal experiences with such ways of presenting news and so on. And but as I said, I'm grateful that we have become far more professional. That the ways and means that Russia tries to influence our societies, our decision makers, and our general public, that is known now. And the interesting thing is also, it's not about propagating a certain ideology. I think what we have learned is anything that helps getting us or more divisive amongst ourselves, everything that weakens us, whether it need not even be in favor of Russia, but something, any news, any issues that add to anxiety or to distort our discussions, anything is fine to be taken up. And even so far that we see on the same issue, a huge diversity of versions. So it is simply to discredit what is truth and what is wrong, to make that in a way more or less doesn't matter. Everybody has his own truth. So it's not objectively to be stated that is true what has happened, but also with MH17 we have heard a multitude of Russian versions what had happened. So the objective is already reached, not that the people believe what actually the Russians say, but it is already sufficient not to believe what our experience or our insights are, and that is really a challenge to address. And well, what we are doing in response, I mean, it is can never be enough. But I mean, our East Stratcom that we have since several years, and that has been enlarged and in scope and We in the parliament have always supported that. Those who want to know and also who want to know the background can actually get themselves informed about that. And well, additional measures that are sanctions, I mean, in this area, to make it very clear that it is not about freedom of opinion, that these are, so to say, they would like to be considered journalists like other journalists, but they are propagandists. They have a task not to tell the truth, but to distort the truth, or to distort the feelings, or to distort our capacity to look what has actually happened. And so far, apart from well, just revealing the truth, in sometimes very many expenses have to be done. Well, we have also taken sanctions. I mean, Russia today is banned. For instance, I had it in the cable here in Brussels. I think since March it's off, and it's off in all of our hotels, if I'm not mistaken. And so far, but that is another discussion that we have again to conduct, to say, no, it's not that we are limited, we are censoring, but it is simply the only measure to be a radical measure, admittedly, but it's as their task is not to tell their version of the truth, but they are spreading the lies. So we have to also take well, radical measures in the sense that we would normally not take. But if their purpose is to get us unsecure and not knowing what really happens, then I think it's good to have also these measures to simply ban them from our media. And still, we have to work, start early, not only with regard to Russia, because they're not the only ones. I mean, in social media, there are real challenges for the society to not to be irritated, and especially with the young ones. So we must start early, I would say, in school, to train on media, training on our pupils, so that they grow up with a spirit of resilience when certain things come suddenly that really are so strange, that they do not simply jump on it and believe it first, and then we have to start working, but keep their distance and their critical awareness what ought to be done. So once again, coming back to what Russia keeps doing in different languages, in different regions of the world, with sometimes different approaches according to the local needs as they see it. I think it's very good to have such an overview. And once again, many thanks for doing this job, and my best wishes to my friend Andreas Umland.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gala. And just to add to what you said about the strategy to confuse the audience, to confuse us, you know, about with all these different versions. I remember myself, like a year after MH17 catastrophe, I was in London, and a friend of mine who I can't describe him as a pro-Russian or pro-Kremlin person, but he asked me what I thought about, like, what happened with MH17, and I described him that the Russians thought that they shot the military plane. It turned out to be a passenger plane, and he looked at me and said, well, yes, but there are so many versions. We don't know what to believe, and this is exactly the aim. But at the same time, in some countries, in some societies, yes, they're trying to confuse the population, to confuse the audience with different versions of the developments. However, in some cases, they are being very, very straightforward. And what we see, the straightforwardness of propaganda, disinformation, is Ukraine. And it's a great honor for me to introduce now Maria Mezentseva, who unfortunately cannot join us in person, maybe next time. Maria is a member of the Ukrainian parliament. She's representing the People's Party, which is headed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Maria is a deputy chairperson of the Committee on Ukraine's EU integration and chairperson of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The reason, obviously, why Maria could not come today is that there was a very important voting in the Ukrainian parliament, and obviously this is more important than our event. Maria, thank you very much for joining us. Do you hear us well?
Thank you so much. Yes, I can hear you well.
With
It's
you.
such a great pleasure, dear friends. And while you were taking seats, I've seen a lot of friends, not only at the panelist row, but also beyond the camera. Colleagues, please stop me when I'm over 5 minutes, because I can talk about propaganda, anti-propaganda, and actually the information war, as we call it in Ukraine, for hours. It's a great pleasure for me to join you today to discuss the findings, which were finalized in a brilliant paper. But I would like to trace us back, as Mr. Gala did, to 2014, when the attempt of illegal annexation of Peninsula of Crimea happened, and the Green Man appeared even in my home city, Kharkiv, which is now at the front line of this barbarian war of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, but not only. We are currently talking about something which is beyond of any understandings, when the twisted information can turn into a real weapon, and it can actually not only influence conflicts, wars, and developments in different societies, specifically on the subcontinent of Europe, but also, dear friends, elections in your home countries. And that's what we have seen in the strategy of RT, or its baby satellite Sputnik, which, as Mr. Gala said, in March were both banned with the support of European Parliament and European Council from the broadcasting, even though in April even and May we have seen during our diplomatic tours on some attempts to come back to the satellites. Well, the audience of these channels with broadcasting in English, Spanish, Arabic, Russian, French, German was around 600 million people. That's a big audience indeed. The concrete steps that were taken during these years, when I remember in 2015, we were doing this raising awareness campaign, when after being or having an internship in the European Parliament, I joined various NGOs like Ukraine Business Council, different raising awareness campaign, when we really had to persuade 751 MEPs that our soldiers in the East are not drinking, and I'm citing here the RT, the blood of Ukrainian babies, or that there is a lady who was interviewed in Slavyansk, in also Donbas area, that she is actually an actress who are playing different roles in given different interviews with specific and deliberate attempt to mislead with the information. That is to say, there was a call of European Council to the European Commission, specifically Foreign Affairs departments, on creating, as you remember, a Stratcom, which was and is and remaining a great overview of a lot of versions of disinformation, sending to decision makers across Europe very concrete pieces of facts and fakes. And we've learned all that, how to identify these things, how to increase the media literacy. Regardless how old you are, you can be misled. And that's what we've learned from these different operations, and I would say severe exercises. Actually, what we have seen is a very, very particular it's a very, very particular technique. Russia today and their satellites were targeting EU and US, so the whole civilized world and its partners, even less focusing on the issues or war in Ukraine, which is continuing up until today. Have we responded all sufficiently? Well, I think we really did, because various institutions have conducted researches and created even departments to fight the disinformation, because it also affects not only the human rights, which we're dealing in European Council for in the Council of Europe, sorry, where Russia was kicked out also for the fact that it was mingling information with MH17. By the way, we've recently passed a very important resolution and looking forward to the court decision on those who are really guilty in that tragedy. And just look at that. This information is really in power to take away people's life. It is really in power to change the political shift in any country. It is really in power to affect economies. This is what was happening for this past 8 years. And I hope that every country who are now standing with Ukraine, because as I always say, Ukraine is not just fighting for ourselves, for our territories, people's minds, and 1,000 years of history. We're fighting for our common values and freedoms. And there was a remarkable day in my also personal life. And we've been shoulder to shoulder with you, dear friends, when we were approaching to the day of receiving a candidate status. I'm sure that Ukraine specifically, Ukrainian parliament with its initiatives and our commitments within the Council of Europe, for instance, on media freedom and broadcasting. We have a new law which will increase the liberty in media, and broadcasting in Ukraine specifically will pave the way for something that we can really call a great job of journalism and great job of coverage. And I would like to pay a tribute for every journalist who are not with us today from various EU member states and beyond, who are really covering war, economic developments, different occasions, and gave their life for the right to be heard and for the words of truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria, for your contribution and for your time to join us. Let me now say a few words, give you a brief background of Russia Today, or as we know it now, RT, to explain to you how it became what it became. Some of you may know that RT, or Russia Today, was launched in 2005. And already that was the second presidential term of Vladimir Putin. And already during the first term, his first presidential term, Russian politicians, he himself, they became concerned with Russia's image abroad. And some would say, well, if we ask people abroad in the US and in the West in general, what you think about Russia, they would say, well, balalaikas, drunken bears, and very cold. So that was the image of Russia. So they were concerned about this, and especially after the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, 2005, there was this drive on the part of the Russian leadership to do something about this. They thought that they lacked some soft power that would be directed abroad. There was also there were also attempts such as launching the Valdai discussion forum to draw foreign journalists and academics and experts in this Kremlin verse, in this Kremlin environment, to talk to them so they would go back to their countries and try to explain Russia to the audiences. So there were several different attempts, not only Valdai Club. And Russia Today was launched in 2005 very quickly. It was basically a project that was launched within a few months. However, and Putin would later in 2013 brag about the launch of Russia Today, as it was called then. He would say that they tried to undermine the monopoly of the Anglo-Saxon media influence. But honestly, if we look at the very beginning of Russia Today, there was nothing like this. That was not about breaking the monopoly of the Anglo-Saxon information area. That was basically an attempt to catch up with the developments. So on the one hand, we can talk about the history of Russia today as the history of the development of Russian soft power. But at the same time, we can look at this differently and see that already in the 90s, major players such as Germany had their own international TV channel, Deutsche Welle. It was operating already in several languages. The Chinese international TV channel was launched, CCTV. The French were lagging behind, in fact, with France 24 international TV channel, that it was launched even after the launch of Russia Today. So there were attempts of major players, regional players, to introduce their own vision of how news should be developed and how news could be spread. So there were several attempts. Then we can talk about also the Iranian TV channel. We can talk about the Venezuela. And interestingly, if you follow the logic, countries which were still are rich in oil tried to introduce to the world their own vision of the world events. So the history, the very history of RT, of Russia Today, has these two sources. First, Russia's own drive to have soft power, and also the global developments in which Russia also played a role. And from 2005 until 2008, I hope that vegetarians among you would not be offended. I would say Russia Today was a vegetarian TV channel. In this period, from 2005 to 2008, it was not even about disinformation, what it spread. Basically, it was a very specific Russian attempt to have soft power, to explain to the audiences why Russia is good. That was the main narrative. That was the main idea behind Russia Today. And at that time, basically, the only criticism, if you look at the media reports, if you look at some media analysis of Russia Today, I mean Western analysis and Western reports, you will see that the only real criticism of Russia Today was that it was basically cheerleading for the Kremlin. So yeah, so that was the main message. The Kremlin is good, Russia is good, look how beautiful our trees are, birch trees, and the valley and the cosmos, the explorations and the science. So that was the idea. So what happened in 2008? The invasion of Georgia. In August, 5 days in August, that's how long the invasion lasts. And so the Russians won the war very easily. The Georgian army was crushed. But there was this feeling among the Russian elites and the experts that were working for the Kremlin that it was easy to win the war, but they lost the information war. They failed to convince the West, that was the feeling, that Russia was acting in a justified manner, that the invasion was justified. And if you remember, that invasion was called it was a peaceful operation. That was about peace. Obviously, it's always about peacekeeping for the Kremlin. But the idea was the feeling that Russia failed to convince the West that Russia was right when it invaded Georgia, and this is where Russia Today started to play a different role. Already then, they realized in August 2008 that they could hardly find foreign commentators, foreign politicians, or I don't know, activists who would provide some information support for the Kremlin narratives. But they couldn't find those people. They couldn't find foreigners who would be saying, yes, Russia was good. But then they found them, and they found them on the far right. In the West, on the far right margins, they found those people who were ready to say that those were obviously the Americans who who started the war via Georgia. They found people who would say that those were the British oligarchs. And sometimes British oligarchs is the euphemism for Jews. So we have some anti-Semitic element here, that they were responsible for, Georgia being aggressive towards Russia. So they realized that they could rely, Russia Today could rely on those commentators. And they started completely to overhaul the entire concept in 2008, 2009. In 2009, Russia Today was renamed into RT, and not to conceal the Russian origins of the TV channel. That was never the aim. It's that the concept changed. They realized that talking about Russia, how great it is and how beautiful it is, was not producing any results, as the West would still not be convinced by what Russia Today was saying. The new concept. So the first concept was Russia is good. The second concept of RT already, that was the West is bad. And this is why they don't understand why Russia is good. It's not about us, it's about them. So this is how the entire concept has changed. They started to invite people who would be confirming the idea that the West is bad. So they would turn to Eurosceptics, they would turn to isolationists, they would turn to conspiracy theorists, to far left activists, to far right activists. Anyone who would say, yes, the West is bad from different points of views, from the points of view of economy, of criticism of multiculturalism, of criticism of the Eurozone, from every corner. So the West is bad became the main, it basically became the main narrative of RT. And what's interesting also is that Maria Simonyan, the chief editor of RT, she was, at some point, she became really very straightforward about the meaning of RT, about the aims of RT. And I want to cite one particular passage from one of the interviews. Margarita Simonyan. She said, the information weapon, of course, is used in critical moments, and war is always a critical moment. The information weapon is a weapon like any other. Of course, the defense ministry cannot start training soldiers, preparing weaponry, and generally making itself from scratch when the war has already started. If we do not have an audience today, tomorrow, and the day after, it will be the same as in 2008. So here she was comparing RT to Defense Ministry of Russia. And she was meaning that we need to have audience right now, because we cannot prepare the audience, the soldier, we cannot train the soldiers during the war. And she was referring to 2008, that moment when there was this overwhelming feeling that Russia lost the information war. So they had to prepare. And she was very straightforward about this, which makes her other claims that RT is just a TV channel like any other totally ridiculous. If she herself confirms and acknowledges the fact that they are being prepared for the information war, this makes RT not a normal media. And another point, and I will stop here, is that as you may know, the usual Western media standards imply that you can have you transmit, you give an opinion, one opinion, but then you need to have a second opinion. So there would be some pluralism of opinions and diversity of views. What's interesting about RT is that they would have only a second opinion. And because for them, the mainstream media already, the entire mainstream media verse, the universe of mainstream media is already the first opinion. So they claim to say that we are the voice of the second opinion. It's not two opinions at once in their reports, but the second opinion. And this conceptually, this also gave the idea to the title or the subtitle of our report, the wannabe elites or the anti-elites. RT presents itself, it positions itself as the second opinion, as the anti-elites. And of course, it also is struggling, and it is willing to become the elite of the anti-elites, to lead this anti-establishment, anti-elite revolt, at least in the information space. And obviously, as Mikhail Gala said, now RT is damaged by the sanctions. RT websites are removed from Google search results, for example. It's actually very easy if you're a researcher now. It's really extremely difficult to explore, to do research on RT, and this is not a joke. It's really hard. And but at the same time, this report is not an obituary to RT, because the same ways, the same instruments, the same approaches, the same tactics that Russia, the Kremlin, used for in the workings of RT, they're being used elsewhere, and they will be used in different places under different names. And we also have two contributors today who wrote fantastic chapters on German version of RT and the French version of RT. And I will ask Sylvia Stöber to continue our conversation. Sylvia is a journalist and author specializing in Eastern Europe. She's an editor for the news program Tagesschau of the German public broadcast ARD, and writes for other media and publications. Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation, and to present the findings of my report. And in my report, I focused on how RT dealt with media regulation in Germany and in the EU and inside Europe. And it's quite interesting that, for example, RT launched RT Deutsch in Germany only in 2014, which was quite late compared to the other countries. And only in 2021, they tried to obtain a TV license for a TV channel, which is also interesting when you see when they tried it, and that it might have been a preparation for what happened in 2020. So that might be that they wanted to have a TV channel ready when all the events started in 2020. So and it was also interesting in which way they tried to obtain this license, because it's quite difficult in Germany, especially for them, to get it, because the authorities must check whether the media in Germany are free from influence from state institutions, and in order to issue a license. And obviously it's clear that RT is financed by the state, by the Russian state. That is one thing. And as you already said, and you quoted Margarita Simonyan, when they see themselves, they present themselves as a weapon and compare themselves to the Ministry of Defense, then it's quite difficult to issue a license on the basis that they are not close to a state. So they played a lot of games during 2021. And first they tried to obtain a license in Luxembourg. And that was interesting because it did not work out because the authorities in Luxembourg and Germany agreed that they would work together and find a solution together, which would be that it's up to Germany to issue this license or not. So that was not successful, and then somehow they tried obviously other methods or other ways. And then shortly before they wanted to start the TV channel in December last year, they finally received a license in Serbia. And there it was interesting to see how it did not work, that Serbia did it, gave this license, and did not work together with Germany or anything else, but they supported Russia in this thing to get this license. So they launched their TV channel in December last year. and immediately they were banned because the responsible authority in Berlin said, no, we don't recognize this TV lenses. You have to get it in Germany. And so what they did was they used this, of course, this decision by the German authorities to say we are a victim, and this is censorship. So the usual games they played, and also they used this decision to ban Deutsche Welle, the German foreign broadcaster, in Russia completely. So they had to get out. They had to move out of Russia, and also they were banned from broadcasting in Russia itself. So that it seems when you look from backwards that it was a whole plan they had in order to achieve some things. And after March, when the European Commission banned RT and Sputnik and the others, of course they are not, you cannot find them anymore that easily in Germany. You need to use VPN to find their websites and so on. But still, they find ways to broadcast their information. Even this TV channel is still somewhere to find. It's still working, and they have lots of methods how to still work and spread disinformation. Because, for example, the former chief editor in Germany, Ivan Rodionov, he is still very active in especially on Twitter. He has his own channel now with other colleagues. He's still spreading this disinformation and is quite aggressively behaving. And there are other channels they use, like Odyssey, which is comparable to YouTube, but which is not that much controlled and not well known. And also Twitter is a big, Telegram is very often used by them. And when you see what happened during the last week about our foreign minister, Baerbock, there were some claims that she, how to say it in short, that she would prefer to help Ukraine and not to hear or to do what the German voters want. This was a claim made by some media, and originally it came from some Telegram channels. So there was they had to do a lot of work to make clear what she actually said in Prague during a conference, and to explain that she wants to be in solidarity with Ukraine, even though her own voters, so the Green voters, would not say yes to everything she does. And also in the same sentence, she said that people who are suffering from inflation and high prices and so on, they should get support by the state. So, but it was shortened in these Telegram channels, and then it went to Twitter, then even to some so-called media, mainstream media, and it was a big issue in Germany. So you can see that they are still quite successful. And another method which became known last week was that they use or they imitate websites from so-called mainstream media like Süddeutsche and others, and try to present articles and so on. But in a technical sense, it is quite good, but the content is quite bad because there are mistakes in it. There are even sometimes Russian words in it. So it's only half professional. It's not fully professional done. And one can ask themselves, why are they doing it in this way? Why are they not that professional to do it in really good way? And then maybe it might be that it's not that important. It's only to have another way that you cannot find Süddeutsche, you can also find another Süddeutsche and another Süddeutsche. So you never know whether it's the real Süddeutsche or not. So this is one of the methods we already very well know. So they are still working on this and finding new ways. And I would say that at the moment they are behaving quite aggressively, and coming now the fall and winter and all the big problems we have in Germany, they will give everything to destabilize the whole society in Germany. And but what is good that we are well aware of what's going on, and still I'm quite optimistic that we will better than them.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And just to add a little bit, it is indeed continuing. And if we look at the position, the social position now, political even position now of Margarita Simonyan today, we look at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. She was very present. She was very visible, and this is not accidental. Nothing like this in Russia is accidental. So she's in prominence. She still plays a very important role in Russia's disinformation war. And our last contributor, last panelist is Hugo Leto, who is a journalist and radio host based in Belgium, in this country. And alongside his work for Le and Radio Campus, he studies media communication and has published a master thesis on Arte France, editorial and media positioning. Hugo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anton. So yes, I studied Arte France, which was launched comparatively to the other branches quite fast. It was launched as a website in 2015 and as a TV channel in 2017. And just 2 years later, in 2019, Arte France was heralded as the main media behind the Gilets jaunes movement, the Yellow Vest protests, both by protesters and the government. So I asked this question, how did Arte France become such a landmark in such a short time? It has to be noted that Arte France was launched on the model of CNN and the model for all major global news media. And it has many restraints. First, the production rhythm is really fast. On Arte France, you have a 30-minute live show bulletin every hour, which is much more demanding than you would find on other channels, and that leads to frequent mistakes on air and an apparent amateurism. Then the audience reach is also quite limited. When it was broadcast in France, it was only broadcast on 2 service providers and on high channels that are difficult to find for the audience. And finally, those kinds of major channels are very dependent on news agencies like AFP or Reuters. RT use them a lot and its own network too. So there are different regional branches, correspondent office and Rappli, the news agency they use. So it's a big network which is very useful, but it has downsides, especially on a technical level. You'll often find programs that are poorly translated into French, hardly understandable actually. And on an editorial level, and this is maybe more important, I have met journalists who complained that they had some contents which were imposed to Arte France by its Russian mother company. In parallel, Arte France did invest a lot to localize itself. In 2019, when I studied the company, they had hired 70 journalists and 50 other employees, and they were almost all French. They had hired famous TV personalities to attract audiences and used generous salaries to bring journalists. But because of their poor reputation, they had trouble hiring good managers. So, for instance, the chief editor, Jérôme Bonnet, formerly worked in a satirical newspaper, so he had no experience in TV journalism. So he has little authority compared to the president, who is the Russian Ksenia Fedorova. So on the outside, Arte France managed to get put on the attire of a French TV with local journalists and stars. But on the inside, these journalists, they had to put up with the demands and processes of the Russian system. So how does this all translate into the news production of Arte France? Well, during my studies, I studied more than 300 articles from the first 2 weeks of January 2019. What I saw is that Arte France mostly covers national news and Western news. The news source are also quite traditional, I would say. It's Western press agencies, French newspapers, French social media. So they tend to follow mainstream topics with a focus on security matters, highlighting controversies and everything. So how does Arte France it follows and reinforces the mainstream's news hierarchy. But in order to give an alternative angle, well, they give a twist to all the news dispatch that they pick up from the news agencies. For instance, journalists have a list of keywords that they delete from news dispatches. For instance, words like annexation, dictator, or regime. I asked the chief editor about this, and he told me that they avoid moral posture. For instance, they don't call Kim Jong-un a dictator because they believe that it is up to the reader to say that he is a dictator. But I argue these terms have scientific meaning, and by rejecting this, RT France denies the scientific reality. Plus, it politicizes the idea of expertise and creates a worldview where the North Korean regime is on the same level as any other regime. Plus, they don't really or actually respect this suspension of judgment. When you actually look at articles, they always dilute words like far right when they talk about parties or leaders, but they still talk about left wing or right wing. And sometimes they'll use very subjective words about leaders like Putin or Matteo Salvini. Plus, they often delete context from news articles. So one example I found is they had 2 articles copied from the AFP about a building collapsing in Russia, but systematically they deleted the paragraph written by the AFP on the lack of safety of Russian buildings. Plus, RT France journalists also add subjective elements to orient the reader. The idea is to keep the core of the news dispatch intact so that they don't change the news, but they just add some little words in the articulation of the article. It can be the headline, which will put a focus on the one bit of information that is closer to their worldview. It will be adding a subheading or an introduction or a conclusion, which will add the idea of a critique. It can be a joke. It can be just a question or something. Then there are hyperlinks. They will use hyperlinks to orient the reader from an article which is very factual to one which is more ideologically oriented. So the idea is that all those sections, the headlines, the subheadings and everything, they are conspicuous, but they are non-essential to the news article. So by adding them, you don't create fake news. You don't even create an alternative take on news. You just suggest a critic. You suggest an alternative point of view. Similarly, they use a lot of rhetorical question. So a lot of headlines, for instance, are used a question mark. So the idea is that they force the reader to question the news, but they don't have themselves to answer it. Or they also use a lot of quotation marks. And it's very strange because it creates an ambiguous distance between the journalist and the reported speech. Quotation marks can signify transparency toward the reported speech, but they can also mean some kind of irony towards what is said. So, and whichever meaning the reader will get, the journalist will appear to side with him. And here lies, I believe, the populist aspect of RT France. Actually, in the articles of RT France, there is very little journalistic analysis or interpretation. Articles are almost never signed, and it's mostly curation, like it would be just the mirror of the people's attention. Similarly, they use a lot of vox pops, on TV, asking people on the streets what they think about news, or using tweets and embedding them into the articles to show the reaction to different news. And obviously, they use it to show their own point of view, which is, for instance, critiquing Emmanuel Macron's as a president. So there is a slanted representation in public opinion that can also be found among the experts that RT invites to talk about subjects. I have the TV journalist who complained to me about how she always invites politicians from the far right or the far left to talk about subjects that they have nothing to do with, just because they need someone to talk about. And on the website, you can actually see the list of the regular contributors, and there's mostly sovereigntists, Eurosceptics, or anti-Atlantist, I would say. And I asked the chief editor about this sovereigntist ideology, and I want to quote him. He said that it was a rising value in politics, which is underrepresented, and in media. And so he said, we encourage that because we encourage difference, but we are not the ones saying it. And I think this apparent neutrality towards the different anti-elites, the different opposition movements is very important to RT France. RT France, I believe, aims to be a mainstream media that would concentrate all the smaller informational stream that comes from political blogs or small medias, alternative medias, small parties, all while keeping the image of a respectable channel, a non-partisan media. And I believe this explains why RT France was so popular among the Gilets jaunes, which was also a quite vast and heterogeneous movement that welcomed many opposition.
Thank you very much, Hugo. And I will just add to what you said about the how RT not only for the French version but also other versions, how they misrepresent, or they forgot maybe something to mention, how they well, as you know, Russia positions itself as an anti-fascist state. That it is against the far right, it's against ultra-nationalists, but it would very often invite far-right activists and politicians, European far-right politicians, and present them as commentators. But when you maybe ask yourself, how comes that they would do such a twist? But well, they don't introduce them as far-right politicians. They would just say conservative. Or they would say just a member of parliament. So they would hide those, definitions. They would hide those descriptions and just not mention them. And in the conclusion, I want to say that, well, first, you can have a copy of this report. I hope there will be enough copies for you. You will find chapters here on, well, first, very different versions of RT, and they're all different, especially if you look at particular coverage, how RT covered the COVID-19 pandemic. You will see that different versions of RT covered it differently, and they covered other topics also differently because they are still dependent on audiences. For example, the Spanish version of RT, its aim is not so much Spain, but Latin America, where you will have the mainstream thought of, center, leftist. So they would not be as sort of right-wing, actually, as the German or French versions. So they would try to talk to the leftist audiences, and the coverage is a bit different. So they try to align, or they try to at least to integrate into the mainstream environment of the countries or linguistic environments where they operate. So thank you very much for coming. We will have after this event a short drinks reception, and we can discuss the question afterwards. But maybe you have questions now, so we can have questions, comments. Roland, please.
Yeah, is there a mic? Or? Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much, Anton. Maria, Slava Ukraine.
Heroям slava, thank you.
Okay, so good to see you all. I'm Roland Freudenstein from GlobSec, which is a Central European policy organization, and this event, like so many others of its kind, have this charming pitfall that we all agree, and we don't need to convince each other, but we could at least exchange some best practice on how to deal with Russian propaganda, disinformation, information warfare, whatever you want to call it. And here's something that I think is under commented in events like this, including this one, I think it is very easy to assume now that everyone who repeats Kremlin narratives is either a paid agent of the Kremlin or a victim of Russian disinfo. But that is not the case. There are people who actually believe that they're doing the best for their countries, for the European Union, for humankind, by precisely repeating the Kremlin's narratives. They do it consciously, they do it with a political game, and they believe they're acting in the best public interest. And that is something that just needs to be taken into account, that ultimately what we're talking about here is a political battle, right? It's not just fighting disinfo and fighting propaganda and lies. You know, a Russia appeaser has to be countered not by pointing the finger at him and saying, you're a Kremlin stooge, but you are wrong for reasons A, B, C, right? So let me just throw this little pebble into the debate here and say that let's not forget about that aspect. And maybe some of the panelists would like to comment upon this. Thank you.
Is anyone panel ready to ask? Or shall we collect? Let's collect.
Yes, good evening. My name is Dirk Schrübel. I'm the EU ambassador to Belarus in exile here. That's why I have the time to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, Anton, and congratulations to you and to the colleagues who have contributed to the good piece. And we will definitely have a close look. I wanted to say one comment and one question, perhaps. I had a similar feeling as Michael Gahler had a moment, what we call in German, aha moment. I have no idea what that is in English, where I discovered disinformation. And in my case, it was in the early days of 2009. I was based in Kiev in our EU delegation. And Russia had cut off the gas on the dot at 24 hours on the 31st of December. First for Ukraine only, but a few days later also for Europe, basically, because they claimed that Ukraine would siphon off the gas in between. And then there was for a week or 10 days, the Russian narrative was dominating the whole public debate, including in Europe, that it was the Ukrainians who had cut off the gas and not the Russians. And Ukraine was totally unprepared at that time to get to a counter reaction. It took minimum 10 days, and I don't remember whether this was Russia Today at the time. I think Gazprom has several own TV channels which were used at the time. But for me, it was a crucial moment to say. And the truth is, Ukraine cannot cut off the gas in the eastern part of Ukraine. The only area where you can cut off the gas, that's what I learned at the time, is just next to the border on the Russian side in Rostov Oblast. There. That was the first moment. The second moment is my last experience in Belarus when I was still there, namely related to the falsified elections, presidential elections of August 2020. Lukashenko, a few days after, asked quickly for help from Russia. And the first help that came was not military, it was not police, it was propaganda help. They quickly sent Margarita Simonyan herself and a team from RT went to Minsk in the mid-August. And what I was surprised about is that within a few days, maybe 2 weeks, they were able to reshuffle the whole public media sector in Belarus. I don't say that the public media in Belarus was a terribly good one and independent one and free one. Of course, it was not. It was always promoting Lukashenko and the regime in whispering. But it did not broadcast so many blatant lies and so many attacks on the West. And this changed basically from one day to another in the mid days of August 2020. And I was really amazed how quickly that went and how quickly they managed it. And related to this, I have a question. Did you or someone else of the colleagues who have contributed to the paper notice some other influence of RT in other countries to influence the public media, the state media, or other media to a degree that they are fully on Kremlin line as it is now the case in Minsk? I'm thinking of Armenia, I'm thinking of Kazakhstan, other Central Asian countries, or whoever you have in mind, because I found it really amazing how quickly they managed this process of turning upside down basically the state media sector in Belarus. I'll stop here. Sorry for being long. Anybody else?
Thank you. I'm Miklos Klimanski. I'm a Hungarian journalist from Slovakia. So, my question is, Anton Shechotsov, are you monitoring the Hungarian situation? Because it's very similar to what Mr. Ambassador said, a little bit how it is working. There is the official version, which is ambiguous, and then you have TV senders. There are so-called private TV senders, and they're repeating Russian propaganda. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's. We need to say thank you to Mikhail Gala.
The experts remain. I'm only the one who would like to quote you.
Thank you. So there was a question on how to deal with disinformation and propaganda. That not everybody who repeats, or not repeats, but who actually has some views on their own which are consistent with the Kremlin propaganda. So how we deal with these people.
Well, I personally wouldn't know how to actually respond to Kremlin propaganda, and because I just studied in the first place, but about being able to stop the conversation and saying what you are saying is wrong. I agree, it is very important. The only I would say obstacle here is that it's like when you talk with conspirationists sometimes, is that by the time you explain how what they are saying is wrong, they have already said 5 other things that are also wrong, and it takes much energy to kind of contradict it. And this is actually a difficult thing, I believe, for democracies to say when the time for debates must stop and action must start, because in a democracy we still have to have a debate, but being in this opposition can be stifling, and this is what I believe Russian communication is trying to prove, is that behind all this debating and everything, in the end it is still an authoritarian system that is in place. So yes, I believe democratic medias and states have to think about how you can contradict somebody who is this kind of communication.
I think what can help is kind of pre-bunking, so to say. When you take, for example, the situation when the war started, or the days before, when Mr. Biden and others said we are expecting a war, we are expecting that Russia will do this attack on Ukraine, for example, or when he and others spoke about false flag operations, people were prepared to this. So many of those things did not happen, or we were prepared to expect this attack. So Russia was not able to set the topic in a way they would have done it in 2014, for example, or in 2008 in Georgia. This is one of the things that might have worked out not so bad. And also when you see what Mr. Zelensky is doing and the way he is a role model against Mr. Putin, and he's much more interesting and much more a person you would like, and not Mr. Putin. So I think in Germany it works in somehow quite well. That it's Ukraine who can sometimes be more influential than Russia. That's my impression, at least. That there are many more people in Germany who believe what Ukraine is saying and not what Russia is saying, as it was in 2014 when many people were surprised and really more on the side of Russia. This is one of the things. And when it comes to media in countries like Armenia and Georgia and so on, what is interesting, it's not RT, but it's Sputnik, the other state media. And they also did it in a very well way, that they arrived there, I think, in 2008 or later, and are seen as serious medias. They are doing quite well reporting, and just kind of neutral reporting, and are seen as a serious source. And now, of course, that the situation is different, and we have Georgia and Armenia struggling, and Azerbaijan and the other countries, they are sometimes setting the topics and so on, and now they can really influence the whole countries. So they are very well placed in those countries. So that's one of the problems as well.
I want to add here that I think really that pre-bunking is very important. In the communication theory, there's this theory called inoculation theory, which means that basically people tend to believe the first idea that they hear, and then they would defend this belief against all other beliefs. So the first they hear something, yeah, and then they would just, yeah, I stick to this particular interpretation of the developments. I'm not so sure about debunking, and what you, Roland, said about that we need to argue with facts. Well, facts don't matter, as we know from populist politics. This is really a problem. This is a huge problem, that facts just don't matter. And I was, for example, if in the studies of the far right and or people who be, holding views similar to the Kremlin, there is some correlation with people who feel that they sort of economically insecure, but there will be no correlation with people who are actually economically insecure. Is, the feelings are more important than facts. Emotions are more important than facts. So we have to deal with this huge problem about the that for some people facts are illegitimate. Emotions are, but facts are not. The question about the real influence, as far as I understand, yeah, of RT. Have you seen this, influence on the mainstream, the penetration of RT's narratives into the mainstream media?
In France, I believe it's quite difficult to try to quantify or understand how much, how actually it is even watched. I mean, for instance, there is no official public data about how many people watch RT France. And I believe one of the strategies behind RT France is to kind of inflate that audience artificially, to make it seem that there are loads of people who are watching it, in order for, other medias to kind of try to imitate or counteract their position, or to criticize them, or to have an opinion about RT, and same thing with authorities or leaders, and so as to, build an image again of the outsider. So I believe there are more and more in France news TV channel that have kind of the same system with especially regarding to opinions versus facts, and how you will bring people with from extremes but not presented as such. But it is different to know if RT was really the precursor in that. I believe the two feed each other. So yeah.
What's interesting, what you already mentioned, that they don't use their own information, RT especially. It's mostly that they use information given by other media and just turn it in another way. So the so-called mainstream media, they don't need RT, but the alternative media, who are presenting them as another source, they are using the twists RT is using and amplifying it. This is a way how they are influential.
Maria, what about the Ukrainian experience? What about the Ukrainian perspective? Have you seen like real direct influence of RT's narratives on the Ukrainian mainstream environment?
Well, I agree to everything that's been said, including the instruments like Telegram, which is not very popular in EU countries, but became really a method of influence, even though, you know, even for my constituency, I use a Telegram channel to inform the people on the ground. So disinformation can be misused. For our strategies, what we've used from 2014, 2015, we've inserted these policies of anti-propaganda, fighting disinformation strategies into the government structures. So the Ministry for Information and Countering Disinformation is even in its long name, including culture aspects. It deals with various issues of information policies, for instance, etc. So it really became something which is embodied in the governmental policy, but also it gave a huge boost for developing different non-governmental sectors, NGOs, and projects like yours to identify basically fakes. In the dynamic world we're living in, when you can't be analyzing information literally, and even there were mentions of Reuters and other sources, like even Euronews was misused for the purposes of disinfo. Being able with your own mind and critical thinking to be analyzing information is very vital. That's why I would totally support, again, at the governmental and educational level, these programs which are running in Ukraine since 2015 and now supported also in mutual funding projects between EU and Ukraine. As of me, as a politician, I was targeted by Russian propaganda, not for multiple times. And this is the way how you learn how to not just live with it, but how to tackle it, how to battle it, and how not to let it in your life. On a bigger scale, from my own experience chairing the delegation in the Council of Europe, you know, we've been witnessing a constant disinfo on the Russian side in their public speeches, in allegations, in attempt of passing particular amendments to the resolutions. Sometimes they failed, sometimes they succeeded, but now it's a different time, and I totally agree with panelists saying that we are comparing ourselves, how we treat the disinfo from quite recently, the Georgian war, which is from 2008 up until today, when disinformation still exists, but our instruments are way more sufficient and productive. I would also like to say that the lack of time in our daily life sometimes brings to misunderstandings. That's why we really have to fight up until today for the coexistence of the freedom of speech and the real facts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I will answer a question about Hungary. I did not do any specific research on Hungary, but I can tell you that, you know, RT exists in several language versions. You know, German, English, French, Spanish, Arabic. There's also a Russian version. With the Sputnik, with the sort of, you know, sister company of RT, you would have many more versions in other languages. Sputnik also tried to establish the Scandinavian versions, several, but they were closed down like in the period of a year, because nobody would read Sputnik in Swedish or in Norwegian. They were a complete failure. And that actually matters for Sputnik, that, you know, that the traffic was minuscule. They would, yeah, why bother? Neither RT, obviously, nor even Sputnik ever tried to establish anything in Hungarian, because Orban media does the better pro-Russian job as the Sputnik or RT. It's the media empire of Viktor Orban is much more efficient. You don't need to have Russian pro-Kremlin media in Hungarian. This is what I can tell you about about the Hungarian case. We have one question. Yeah.
If I may, I know it's a terrible thing to ask a question right at the end, but I'll be quick, I promise. My name is Martyna Bildziukiewicz. I'm head of East Stratcom Task Force. So the EU's first response to Russia's disinformation, as it was mentioned several times already, and thank you for that. By the way, on the Hungarian issue, there is a very pro-Kremlin outlet called Newsfront. It has a Hungarian version. You can find cases of disinformation EU versus info database from it. But now to the question. So some of you may know that the East Stratcom Task Force has been in place since 2015. And back then, for a few years, actually, we felt like we were, you know, shouting wherever we could, but we were not very well heard. This has changed tremendously in the last few years, and especially with Russia's aggression against Ukraine again this year, it has changed even more, and the EU has stepped up significantly what it has been doing against Russia's disinformation. And now I have a feeling, and let me be a little bit provocative here, that the topic kind of wears out a little bit in the European Union. There was an aha moment, to quote Dirk here, right when Russia attacked again. But now, the longer the war takes and the more awareness we're raising, actually, the more the topic wears out. So my question, especially to the journalists in the room, would be, how do you think we should talk to the general public about the threat of disinformation? Thank you.
Well, that is a good question, because, yeah, obviously the happening of the war and the banning of RT changed a lot for us in our studies of the channel, and we will see, I believe, in the coming months how the different branches of RT evolve after the war. I believe RT France, for instance, has started again to produce like news bulletins live on TV. So I agree that it is not going to come back the same way it has been. But for instance, I know in France they are going to target a lot more the French-speaking countries of Africa, and also all the audience they have managed to gather and that can still follow it by going on the internet and using mirror sites. And I believe there will be, and I believe this audience is not that small, and it is not just limited to RT. There are a lot of small or even sometimes bigger websites that surf on conspiracy theories and populist analysis and all the different techniques that we have studied. And it will be difficult, I believe, to talk to this audience and to try to show them how, you know, how RT and other medias manipulate news. So and for the democratic integrity, if I can say, it is important to not lose this audience, which in a way, how could I say, is becoming more and more extreme.
Maria, I would like to ask you now, you know, with the escalation of the invasion after February of this year, obviously, I think we may all expect that the pro-Kremlin narratives are not as popular in Ukraine as they used to be. But do you still think that the information warfare, the Kremlin's information warfare against Ukraine, is it still, you know, is it still valid? Is it still there? Has it changed since, say, last year?
Well, it has changed dramatically. I mean, I'll try to be very brief. There's so much going on every day that, you know, even me, I'm becoming tired of scrolling how many damaged buildings there are from Kharkiv to Lviv, everywhere across Ukraine, or what what the Russian propaganda has said today to break recently renegated relationships with different member states of the EU and beyond. And Africa was just recently mentioned by the Belgian panelist. I totally agree that after losing again this battlefield, in a way, let's say, one of the rounds of it was lost recently, and there is a wish to still broadcast in different languages. Russia, RT including RT, Russia is trying to maintain the brand of the peacekeeping or whatever they are presenting themselves in the world, moving to African continent, where, for instance, Ukraine will make a move on very shortly with a big diplomatic tour coming soon. And, you know, after speaking in Lugano with many opposition leaders of Latin America and African continent, I can reconfirm that it's a new tendency of the Russian disinformation campaigns. Even, you know, when we brought a delegation of the World Parliamentary Congress, which comprises more than 150 countries, bringing them to Bucha, Irpin in the Kiev region so they can witness the war crimes which Russia committed, we couldn't get a very direct statement after that. You know, they got back, they said, okay, yeah, this is the war happening, this is the number of the war crimes, we've seen this and that. But sometimes the penetration of the influence is going beyond something which we call disinformation. It goes on a political level, and we haven't mentioned here, colleagues, various agents which are working specifically for security services of Russia, for FSB, etc. And they are trying to mingle the political landscape as well, so that someone can be afraid of speaking the truth. I think all that decreases. That's why the new strategies are being searched by Russia. But we're totally sure that they will fail with the strategy, because there is no, we've came through this turning point. I think nothing worse than the crime of aggression, which happened first time since, well, secondly already since the Second World War, establishing the International Tribunal for the purposes of bringing perpetrators, Putin and his elite, to justice, is something that's showing to us that we are succeeding, friends. I know that with many political campaigns that were held recently in Europe and are about to come in different parliaments, they will still try to influence, and they will use all means for that, because still in the UN bodies, for instance, they are somehow, you know, this margin in votes is on some resolution are has a very, very small percentage of women. And we would want to see us all, a civilized world, winning, because the disinformation war, as I said, is something which is at the one point a little bit invisible, but it really takes people's life away, not just someone's funds or economies or visions. So for us as Ukraine, I think we've became way much stronger. We've been interacting, with, for instance, with the EU Stratcom on different areas of cooperation, bringing common analysis on the ground. You know, when you receive daily mail, well, I'm receiving that up until today, I really want to call on many of you in this hall to spread the info. And what Ukraine has started doing since the full-scale invasion, we are translating into different languages and spreading the info across the world. That's our assistants who are doing that in the cooperation partnerships with various NGO projects. So information remains the key to our joint success and to our joint victory, and this is really not only about us. Sometimes we can be misled, but there's always a chance to find out what the truth is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And on this positive and optimistic note, I want to conclude our official discussion, and maybe we can continue discussing this important phenomena during the drink reception. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience.